What's it like sailing on Royal Caribbean's newest versus their oldest cruise ship? This week we've got a first-hand look at trying Royal Caribbean's newest and their oldest ships in order to figure out which is the best choice for you. Here we go. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and I'll tell you, I oftentimes get questions about should I spend extra for the new ship, or is going on an old ship a bad idea, or anything along those lines. Basically, new versus old, and is it like kind of like cars, where is it worth it to step it up and get the newest and greatest and latest, or are you better off, especially value-wise, by going with an older cruise ship? In the past year, our video editor Jenna has sailed on Royal Caribbean's oldest and newest cruise ships, and we wanted to hear from her how they compare in terms of cabins, dining options, activities, and overall experience. Let's hear from Jenna to see how her experiences on one of Royal Caribbean's oldest and newest ships compare to each other.
Hey everyone, it's Jenna from Royal Caribbean Blog. The first thing I'll compare today is my cabin on both ships. Rhapsody of the Seas is over 25 years old, and our cabin definitely showed its age. The cabin had older bedding, the furniture upholstery could use an update, and we had a cloth shower curtain in our bathroom. The color scheme was relatively outdated too, with dark green furniture and cream-tinted walls, and the room size left a little to be desired. On the contrary, my Symphony of the Seas cabin appeared modern, spacious, and with an impressive amount of storage space. The cabin had closet and drawer space on each side of the bed, in addition to a dresser with more drawers. The blue color scheme was more pleasing than Rhapsody's outdated decor, and I found the room to be much more comfortable during our time on board. My one gripe with our cabin was that I felt like the bed would have been better placed at the back of the room. We constantly had to walk around a teeny space between the bed and desk, so the cabin layout seemed poorly designed. Next, let's move into dining. On Rhapsody of the Seas, I ate primarily at the buffet and main dining room. Symphony of the Seas, on the other hand, had many more complimentary dining venues available. Being a smaller cruise ship, Rhapsody of the Seas has limited complimentary dining. There are 4 places to grab free food on board: the main dining room, Windjammer, Park Cafe, and Cafe Latitudes. I enjoyed most meals at the main dining room and Windjammer, as these venues have the most options. I was impressed with the buffet's food selection, and I'd say it was one of the best buffet experiences I've had on Royal Caribbean so far. We also made a few stops to Park Cafe during the late night hours. These ran from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., and this is when Park Cafe served pizza, sandwiches, and desserts, and it was the only late night option on board. Unsurprisingly, Symphony of the Seas has many more complimentary dining venues to cater to nearly 7,000 passengers. There are 10 places to eat included in your cruise fare, from Mexican at El Loco Fresh to pizza at Sorrento's. Park Cafe on Symphony of the Seas is located in the ship's Central Park neighborhood. Like on Rhapsody of the Seas, this venue offers grab-and-go options like bagels, salads, soups, and sandwiches. I much preferred the outdoor location on Symphony of the Seas, but the venue wasn't open for late-night snacks like on Rhapsody. Honestly, I found the buffet on Symphony of the Seas to be lacking. I wasn't particularly impressed with any of my meals there. The buffet's size also felt way more cramped compared to Rhapsody of the Seas, despite the ship being so much bigger. As far as specialty dining goes, Wonderland was my favorite restaurant experience on Symphony of the Seas. Rhapsody of the Seas had more traditional specialty dining options, but that doesn't mean the dining experience wasn't enjoyable. I tried 4 specialty restaurants on Symphony of the Seas: Jamie's Italian, Izumi Sushi, Wonderland, and Playmakers. Of the restaurants, Wonderland was my favorite dining experience. Wonderland is an eclectic restaurant based loosely on the tales of Alice in Wonderland. The restaurant goes above and beyond standard menu choices by offering unique, imaginative dishes that don't necessarily look the same as they taste. The whole meal was really interesting and exciting, and it's something that I didn't think I would really enjoy, but it ended up being one of my favorite meals of the cruise. Now let's go to specialty dining on Rhapsody of the Seas. Despite being one of Royal Caribbean's smallest ships, I actually found myself surprised by the amount of specialty dining options on Rhapsody of the Seas. The ship has 4: Chop's Grill, Giovanni's Table, Izumi Sushi, and Chef's Table. We dined at Izumi Sushi one evening of our cruise, and found the ambiance and food to be just as enjoyable as on Royal Caribbean's newest ships. Although the newest Royal Caribbean restaurants aren't available on Rhapsody of the Seas, like Giovanni's Italian Kitchen and Hooked Seafood, I found the variety of specialty options adequate for sailing on an older ship. However, when it comes to entertainment, there's no question that the entertainment on Symphony of the Seas was several notches higher than that on Rhapsody of the Seas. While performers on both Symphony of the Seas and Rhapsody of the Seas were equally talented, it was clear the entertainment on the latter had a much higher budget. I don't necessarily cruise for entertainment shows, but I was beyond impressed with the shows on Symphony of the Seas. From the ice skating performance in Studio B to the Broadway production of Hairspray, I made sure to never miss a show on board. The most impressive production, in my opinion, was Hero in the ship's aqua theater. This show combined high diving, slacklining, tightropes, aerial acrobatics, synchronized swimming, and dancing for one of the most mind-boggling performances I've ever seen on a cruise ship. The entertainment on Rhapsody of the Seas, on the other hand, is the area in which the ship fell the most flat for me. Not only does the ship have far fewer entertainment venues, with most productions in the main theater only, but I found the shows to be a bit outdated for my generation. I did enjoy the variety of live music on both ships, from piano tunes to jazz bands and reggae music. If I had to pick one ship over the other when it comes to entertainment, though, I would definitely pick Symphony of the Seas. Let's move on to the pool deck, which had a much more relaxed vibe on Rhapsody of the Seas compared to Symphony of the Seas. Although I preferred the entertainment on Symphony, I preferred the pool deck on Rhapsody. With so many passengers on Symphony of the Seas, the pool deck was packed nearly every time I tried to use it. I wasn't interested in sharing a hot tub with 20 other passengers or swimming in a crowded pool full of kids. I noticed much more chair hogging than usual as well, and it was nearly impossible to find a pool chair in the middle of the day. With the traditional decor and lack of water slides on Rhapsody of the Seas, it wasn't as exciting as Symphony of the Seas, but I honestly preferred the vibe there. With one pool outside and one pool in the solarium, I didn't encounter nearly as many crowds using the pools. Although this could have been due to our port-intensive itinerary, I still found myself enjoying the pool deck far more on an older cruise ship. As far as activities go, activities were much more varied on Symphony of the Seas, but there were way more kids on board. Royal Caribbean's Oasis-class ships offer a far greater amount of activities compared to the fleet's oldest vessels. It's practically impossible to feel bored on Symphony of the Seas, and I was almost overwhelmed with the amount of activities to choose from. Whether water slides, rock climbing, or using the flow rider, each day on board was packed with a full schedule of activities. Even if adrenaline isn't your thing, you could still find an abundance of programming like trivia and game shows and live music. And of course, Symphony of the Seas is especially popular with families, and there were a lot of kids on board. With a large adventure ocean and family-friendly activities like a carousel and Splashaway Bay, it's no surprise that there were tons of families. As someone without kids, however, I have to say I preferred the more adult-focused atmosphere on Rhapsody of the Seas. Although Rhapsody still had activities for kids, the ship doesn't seem catered to families nearly as much as Symphony of the Seas. And as far as itinerary goes, I preferred the itinerary on Rhapsody of the Seas. Generally speaking, Royal Caribbean's oldest and smallest cruise ships offer way more fascinating itineraries compared to their newer ships. New Royal Caribbean ships focus more on the ship itself rather than the destination, and their big size means they can't fit into as many cruise ports as smaller ships. While there's nothing wrong with viewing the cruise ship as your vacation destination, I find the itineraries on smaller, older Royal Caribbean ships to be far more interesting. My Rhapsody of the Seas sailing left from Athens, Greece, and visited Mykonos, Crete, Zakynthos, Kotor, and Split before ending in Ravenna, Italy. We only had one sea day on our entire 7-night cruise, and the ship felt more like an afterthought compared to the incredible ports we were visiting. When I booked my cruise on Symphony of the Seas, I had fewer itinerary options. The ship's Caribbean itineraries visit the same ports week after week, and the itineraries all visited popular cruise ports I've been to before. I settled on a Western Caribbean cruise, and while I won't ever complain about spending the day in Mexico, I much prefer the wider range of itinerary options on Royal Caribbean's oldest ships. Overall, I enjoyed sailing on both ships. Each ship has its own advantages and disadvantages, which may vary depending on your travel style. I have to say I have a soft spot in my heart for Royal Caribbean's older and smaller ships. While they may lack the shiny, sparkly new decor and venues, I appreciate the more traditional cruise ship experience they offer. I'm perfectly happy sitting on the promenade deck and watching the ocean pass by without worrying about rushing to trivia or a theater show. At the same time, I do enjoy the upgraded entertainment and programming available on Royal Caribbean's newest ships. There's something special about eating breakfast in Central Park, strolling through the Royal Promenade, and having endless choices. If there's anything my experience on both ships taught me, it's that having the right mindset can make or break your cruise vacation. If I boarded Rhapsody of the Seas expecting it to be on the same level as Symphony of the Seas, I would have been disappointed. Likewise, if I boarded Symphony of the Seas expecting it to be a quiet, traditional cruise environment, I would have been shocked once on board.
So there you have Jenna's look at old versus new. Well, I'm curious what you think about going on an old versus a new cruise ship. Let me know in the comments below which do you prefer and why, or maybe you don't and you just go for whatever works for you at the time. I'm always interested in hearing the different comments and thoughts that everybody has in our comments below. While you're down below our video, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way YouTube lets you know we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.